G'day, Stu here from UAVfutures, and well, it's Sunday, so what that means, we're going to be doing another question and answer video. Now, if this is your guys' first time tuning in, the way this works, you guys drop questions down in the comments below. I go through and answer some of the questions that you guys have. So if you've got a question that you want to ask me, definitely stick it in the comments down below, and then hopefully in the next segment, which is in about 2 weeks' time, I'll be able to answer some of the questions that you guys have. Anyway, enough rambling about how it works. Welcome to the show if you're just tuning in. But let's jump straight in and answer some of these FPV questions about these drones. Rightio. So this one's from Gonzalo Carvijal. Anyway. He says, "Hey Stu, I love your channel and these are in no particular order either. I've just gone through and screenshotted some of the questions to answer. Anyway, hey Stu, love your channel and your enthusiasm for this hobby. I'm just starting out and I've got a question. I've read that your ESC can burn sometimes. Can you please explain why this happens and how you can avoid it? Would you recommend keeping a few spare ESCs on stock? I have like a 2-month delivery time to my country." So that's sort of a two-part. So the first part is, why does an ESC burn out? And there's a few reasons. Look, it could just be component failure. It could just be sort of saying giving up, but I'd say that's pretty rare. Some of the two most probable causes is either there's been a little crash, or you've had a little short, or something's gone wrong where the wires are touching and just some sort of causing a lot of current to go through there, and it's just shorting out and burning out. And then the other one is your motors might be sucking down way too many amps. So these ESCs are only rated for a certain amperage. So I think this is like an old Drone Wolf pup, and I think these ESCs are only 20 amps. But if you don't, and they also have a burst rating as well. So I think they have a burst rating of 30 amps for up to 10 seconds. But you need to check on your ESC specifications. So when you're buying them, check out how many amps they can handle. There'll be like a sustained and also a burst rating. And pretty much what happens if you go over that, so say you had a motor that was drawing some crazy amount of amps and you only had a 10 amp ESC, that's too much current that's going through, and it's just going to cause your ESC to fry and burn because it can't handle all that power going through there. So a really good rule, I think, for most 5-inch 4S mini quads, if you're just getting some 30 amp ESCs, I think they're going to have a good enough burst ratio that you're not going to be running into too many problems. Now, regarding to buying spares, usually I don't burn out too many ESCs lately. I've been really lucky, I think, in this hobby. I really haven't burnt out many at all, but I know a lot of people have burnt them out in the past. I think they're getting more stable nowadays, but if you're looking at a 2-month wait time, I would probably be recommending to buy one spare of almost everything. So especially one spare motor, one spare ESC, one spare VT. But you could almost buy a whole frame, but yeah, it really depends. If it was up to me for waiting for a 2-month wait time and I only had one quad, I would definitely be ordering a spare. But if I had some backups, I would probably just focus on just keeping those 2 backups, and then I wouldn't be running a spare, like getting individual spare components. So hopefully that helps you. Alrighty, so this one's from John ZX. What's the difference between VTX antennas and I think it says video receiver antennas? And not too much nowadays. I think a lot of the times, I'm just going to go grab some. We've got a bunch of different antennas in here. So pretty much in the past, you used to have to match your antennas up. But there's a lot of different receiver antennas now, and probably the biggest one that I'm going to talk about is the ones you put on your goggles. Some of these, like the helical or the patch antennas, they're going to be great, and they're going to get like a big focused beam of I guess, reception when you're flying around. But on your mini quad that you actually have, you probably want something either like the whip antenna, which is just those straight little dipolars, or something like a circular polarized. So that way, it doesn't matter which direction your mini quad is facing, you're still going to be sort of getting some signal back to you, because you can imagine a situation where you're flying around, and if you had one of these receiver sort of types of antennas on here, you might be getting great reception as it's pointing at you as it flies away. But when it turns around and it's pointing that way, you're not going to be getting anything because the whole signal is being sent out away from you, assuming you guys are the camera. So on most of the time on a quad, you're just going to have a circular polarized or a whip antenna, and then on your head, you're probably going to be rocking, if you're using a diversity system, you're probably going to be using something like one of the normal circular polarized antennas, but you may also be using a patch or a helical, and that's really going to help you improve your FPV reception. Alrighty, so this one's from Caleb Johnson. Just did my first FPV flight a few days ago and I'm having a lot of trouble landing when you have the camera tilted upward for flight. How do you land your quad when all you can see is the sky? Now I sort of do two things here. When I'm coming into land, I can't say I'm coming in and then I sort of turn and wipe off a lot of speed. So that lets me know that I'm sort of, I don't know, I've seen a few pilots do this. They come in and they sort of spin around on the spot. And then I tend to focus on something, so hopefully I can see something, and I just sort of lower the throttle and then cut it. A lot of my landings, to be honest, are pretty shocking. Like they might be from like a meter up in the air, or you know, a foot or so. So they're definitely not coming in for a super smooth landing at all, especially if I can't see anything. But these things are pretty robust, so I wouldn't stress too much about dropping it from a meter's height, because it's going to be totally fine. I guess unless you're dropping it in somewhere where it could be, you don't want to drop it into sand or anything like that. But if you're just dropping it onto the grass or onto some park covering or something like that, I think don't focus on your landings too much. Just do your best, and even if you have to and it's not going well, just kill that arm switch and just totally disengage it, disarm it, and just let it drop, because it's probably going to be pretty fine anyway. Alrighty, moving on. So Tyrone FPV, hey Stu, you said in your last Q&A that you take 5 quads to the field to fly usually. Do you ever worry about getting mugged? That's at least a stack or 2. I don't know what a stack is. Do you mean like a stack of cash or something? As far as taking 5 quads to the field and worrying about getting mugged, no, I guess I don't really worry about that stuff. You don't really have to worry about that stuff sort of in the places that I go flying, and I usually always go flying with other people as well, which makes it a little bit safer. But one thing I do worry about is, say if I go off and I have a crash, and this happened the other day. So Grumpy Trevor and I were out flying around, and his Tyrant sort of wigged out and crashed over like a fair distance away in some long grass, and we had to go looking for it. And I went out and helped him, and we didn't know how long it was going to be. And we were maybe 100 meters away from our gear, and that is sometimes I do worry if we're all away from our gear, and then you've got thousands of dollars just sitting in the middle of a park. Yeah, that can be a little bit sketchy. So I think just play it safe. And if you're going by yourself when you've lost a quad, that's you really need to weigh up that options. And if you can, if I was by myself in a really public sort of place, not that I fly around places that are too public or too crowded anyway, and I was feeling a little bit sketchy, I would probably make sure all my gear was portable so I could take it with me, because the last thing you want is I don't think someone's going to come and mug me, but I wouldn't put it past someone if they just saw a whole bunch of stuff sitting on the side of a park with no one in sight to possibly take one of these little racing drones, because they do look pretty cool. So I think that just comes down to common sense. Always be mindful of how long you're going to be away, how far are you away, and what's the value of what you actually have lying there. But very interesting question, very cool, because I have thought about it. I don't want anyone taking my gear at all. Is there a difference? So moving on, this one's just from FPV. So is there a difference between a $30 frame and a $100 frame? Is the carbon better? And I'm going to say yes, there is a difference, and there is some significant differences in carbon strength. But in my opinion, I think that the total high quality premium frames, you're usually paying for things like the cut's perfect. There's usually no scratches or anything like that. They line up perfectly. They fit together really, really well. And the super budget frames, they're usually a little bit more dicey. Some of the holes sometimes don't line up. But in terms of, is the real question I think that people want to know is there a difference in terms of value-wise between the $20 and the $100 frame? Or sorry, $30 and the $100 frame. And I would say the difference is not worth that $70 difference. But you also have to remember that those companies, those first companies that have gone out and done it, a lot of their costs, and the reason it's so expensive, it's not because it's expensive to produce it and with the carbon or cut it or anything like that, but they have to recuperate some of their R&D costs. So that's why some things I think are a little bit more expensive, and people forget that, yeah, just because this frame is doing one that's a bit cheaper and this one's a bit more expensive, the cheaper one a lot of the times has just straight out copied what the more expensive one is doing. So it's kind of a very tricky situation for all players involved. Alrighty, moving on. So Stephen Emmons, and your question is, hey Stu, great content for your vlog. Thanks. I was wondering, how useful do you find on-screen data in your FPV flying? And this is something I've really changed my tune on. Ever since I switched over to this little radio right here, you don't get telemetry or anything like that. And to be honest, I didn't really like the readout when I was on my Tyrannus. And really what I use it for, it's just about monitoring my voltage, my battery voltage when I'm flying around. And the amount that I'm sort of pushing these anyway, I find it a little bit unreliable because it can be dropping all over the place. but it's just an indication. So I find when I look at the timer and I look at, I guess, the voltage of it, and I can sort of triangulate that data, or what do you call that when you've got only 2 points of data, but I look at those two numbers and I sort of make a judgment about how cooked is the LiPo, because sometimes they're getting very, very warm. And look, I do find it very, very useful. I don't really like flying without it, and I find nowadays, look, it only takes a second to glance down. It's much easier than just sort of having a guess or a timer. But nowadays when I'm flying around, I think if I don't have one, I am often coming in way too early and I'm not getting the most out of my flight. So it might be like you might have another extra 30% in terms of your battery. And that might not sound like much, you know, if you come in 30% early, but over the course of a day, that's 30% of your flying time. So over 50 batteries, that's quite a few minutes of extra flight time you could have had. So I'd say if you can put an OSD in, it's one of the best things that you can do, as long as it's simple and it works, because they can also throw a few spanners in the works and they can be a little bit difficult. Some of them anyway can be a little bit difficult to set up. So big tip out there. Definitely, if you can put in an OSD or you find something useful, especially some of the built-in ones, I would definitely say go for it. Put this little bad boy up here. Alrighty, I didn't know this. This one's also from Stephen Ammon, so I must have just screenshotted this one straight after. So another thing he says, I'm going to paraphrase because it's kind of a long question, but he's saying, will FPV skills learned on a Tiny Whoop or a Fury Wasp or other equivalent platform transfer well to a 5-inch proper quad? And I'm going to say absolutely. You know, if you're practicing with a Tiny Whoop, even a Hubsan, any little toy quad that you can have is definitely going to help your skills when it comes here. And if you can do some mini FPV with, say, excuse me, if you can do some mini FPV with something like this, I think this is, whatever this is, I'll leave a link up here anyway. I can't remember its exact name, but the Fire Maker, something like that. But yeah, definitely, if you can do some mini FPV with this, it's just going to, that muscle memory, it's going to make a huge difference. So a good, maybe it's like first learning to drive a real dodgy car. You're going to, even learning to drive a dodgy car, you're going to have a much better time trying to drive or learn to drive a high performance sports car. And if you just jumped into the high performance sports car straight off before you'd even driven anything, it's going to be much, much harder. So yeah, you'd be amazed. If you're doing some FPV, even with a little toy quad, it's going to make a massive difference to how easy that transition is into a proper racing drone. Alright, so from Itchy Robot, Stu! Oh, I like the way you spelled my name, S-C-H-E-W, but Stu, g'day! Love your channel, mate. Thank you very much. I have a question about the future, perfect for UAVfutures. Do you think anything will come along that kills drones completely in the future? Kind of like the CD did to the cassette. What do you think that might look like? Well, that was just, I guess, the CD and the cassette, that was just a better way to do the technology. So the only thing that would kill this for me is if there was a more interactive thing that I could control and fly around through the air. So really, it would just be like the CD and the cassette, it's just a better way of playing media. So if there was a different drone that came along that did something differently, I'd probably jump on board and do that one differently, as long as it was like racing. But yeah, I don't think that's really going to happen, because RC's been around for a long time, and it's sort of just like the next evolution of the hobby, you know. So we had, I guess, like the old school planes flying by wire, and then remote control, and then we started to have helicopters, and now we've got these drones or mini quads and things like that. And especially now you can actually race them, and putting FPV in there, I really think there's a big future in there. So I think it's going to be very cool, and it's going to stay very exciting and fresh and relevant to a lot of people out there for a long time to come. So no, I don't really think anything's going to come along and kill drones, because they're just too much fun. Like, how could you not want to do these things? Alrighty, Curtis Preston, this is a pretty strange one. Do you think there will be a drug problem in drone racing like esports had last year? And yeah, maybe. I think it depends on the money and the popularity. Look, I can totally see a situation where pilots are out there. If you're looking for that edge, and say there's $1 million in prize money, I can almost guarantee that people will be taking any edge they can to get into it and try to get the edge over their competition. So if that means taking stimulants or whatever that means over someone else, and especially if it's not regulated, and it gives you the edge to win, I mean, if there's big money involved, people are going to do those things. So hopefully that doesn't become a problem, and if it gets really, you know, if it does get some serious commercial backing and industry backing behind it, maybe, you know, could there be drug tests and all those sorts of things? Because I'm sure there is in other racing leagues. But hopefully we don't go that way, and I think that's something that's really important about our community, even though the races, they can be really cutthroat and people are pushing for those podium positions, but there's such a strong sense of community. I think there's a lot of situations where pilots don't want to cheat to win. They want to be the best they can to win. And I've heard stories of, say, two guys about to race off and one of them's totaled their quad, and so the competitor said, here, you can fly mine. I can't remember where I saw this story on, but the competitor says, here, you fly my quad. So imagine that, pilots actually giving each other a quad. It's not about winning so much, it's about being the best. And that's being the best that you can be. And that's where it is in our hobby anyway at the moment. So I think that's really exciting, and hopefully it doesn't turn into that drug situation where people need that edge. But with big monies involved, look, I could see that happening. Alrighty, now moving on, X32 factor. Now this is a bit of a long question, so I'm going to paraphrase here. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but I'm thinking that I am one of those that is debating whether to oh my gosh, can't read. I am one of those that is debating whether to buy pre-built or to build my own. My biggest concern is price to performance and taking out the learning experience. Do you find that pre-builds will have a better bang for the buck compared to building your own? And I'm going to say, not really, like unless it is big time mass produced, something like the Wizard. I still think, look, I'm going to be doing something special for people coming up, a special build video, but I really think that if you scrape around and you search for the pieces that you want, there is really no way, especially if you shop around and you get some things on special, there's no way that someone can get the components as well as pay for someone to build it than if you do it yourself. Now, of course, there's like scales of production and all those sorts of things and buying in bulk. But I think the cheapest way really, if you really want to scrape every cent out of it, would be to build it yourself. Choose your own components. Yeah, you might not be able to have these ESCs. You might have to switch them out for this brand or shop around and mix and match and those sorts of things. But I definitely think, besides the learning experience, which is so powerful and so useful in this hobby, to save the absolute most amount of money, I definitely think people should be building their own, because they're going to know exactly what's in there and they're going to be able to find some pretty good components for some pretty good prices. And plus, you don't have to pay someone to build it. Like, it costs time and money to employ someone to put a quad together. Moving on, so from Chris Croft, I should say. Stu, have you thought of trying an FPV wing? Yes, I would love to do some FPV wing action. I'm totally keen for that. It's just pretty much finding the right opportunity, the right wing to use, and also some space to fly it, because I think I'm going to need to go out somewhere a little bit further away than actually where we are now, because the places I fly are fine for mini quads, but I feel like a wing might take up a little bit more space. But yeah, I'm dying to do something like that. Todd Ackerman, I love your channel, Stu. Well, thanks so much, man. I'm really happy that you're enjoying it. My question would be about motors. There's a huge difference in price, even for the same size motor. How do you choose between the best motor to fit your racing quad? Is more expensive always better? No, more expensive is not always better. And look, there are some really expensive motors out there. There are some really cheap motors out there. And again, it goes back to that earlier question about, is the cheaper one worth, or how does the cheaper one go to the more expensive one? You know, and there's things like R&D costs, material use, but I'm going to say motors are one thing where going super cheap I don't think works very well. Going really expensive is definitely not worth it in my opinion, but there's some really nice middle ground somewhere there in the middle where because you still need things like good windings, good components, good things like strong magnets in there are going to make a huge difference, especially in terms of raw power and maybe some efficiency as well. So look, I would go for middle of the range. Definitely don't go the cheapest that you can, because you will feel it in your motors, even more so than, say, look, carbon, you can say carbon is carbon with some slight variations. Motors, there is a massive difference between the budget ones, and the high quality, and the high expensive ones, and the middle ones as well. The middle ones are usually pretty good without breaking the bank. So I would probably just aim for some middle of the range ones, because there definitely is a big difference. In terms of how do I pick them, that's kind of what this channel's about. You know, read up on the reviews. Don't just always look at what it says on the manufacturer's site. Look at other reviews. Mini Quad Test Bench does some great stuff on some motors. See what other people are saying about it. Forums. Ask around. You know, sort of put the feelers out there and see just what are people saying about a certain specific motor before you buy. So M Zargok. So I hope I said that right. M Zargok. Hey Stu, do you and all your mates follow any rules or guidelines when you all fly together, you know, to avoid constant crashes and stuff? Love the channel, keep it up. So thanks so much for this question. I really liked this one. And yeah, we actually do. So We've got things, we always set up one course, whether it be clockwise or anti-clockwise directions on when you're going around the track, because you definitely don't want to be having a head-on. We don't plug in next to each other because, say, if someone else is flying and I plug my quad in, you can totally wipe their video out. We always give it a little countdown, so we're always like, okay, I'm going to plug in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you plug in, and that gives the pilot who's ever flying around a chance to sort of bring their quad in a little bit close and get in a really nice sort of stable hover zone, just in case it does black out for that 1 or 2 seconds while you plug in. We try to land a little bit away. And then the only other thing is if someone goes out onto the track, you need to communicate very, very clearly, okay? Especially, you've got to be with people you can trust. But, say Trevor's crashed. Trevor never crashes. But say you've got Trevor's going out to get his quad or something. He's going to say, look, I'm just going on the track. I'm going over to this tree, and we name our course usually like, you're at the big tree or the split or the back straight, river straight, the over and under, whatever. Some sort of, you need to identify where you're going on the track. We call that out to our mates, and then we sort of stay away from that part until you hear them yell out, "I'm clear," or something like that. So that's probably some of the biggest things that we do anyway. And we also make sure that we have our channel spacing set up correctly. But I've got a whole thing on how to get 6 pilots all flying around together. So if you watch this link up here, we all make sure that we're all on the right channels. And that definitely that's probably the biggest thing that we can all fly around together. But thank you for that question. I think that's going to help a lot of people out there. So thanks for sticking that down. Moving on, AC Murrock Mimic. Hey Stu, great content. So what is your thoughts on top-mounted and bottom-mounted batteries? Now, for me, for a long time, if I had to choose nowadays, when I started, look, it was all about the top-mounted battery, and it's okay. But for me, I think under-mounted is one of the best ones because it sort of pulls your quad into the corner and you can use that momentum to move around a little bit. A lot of people are worried about in their landings, are you going to scuff up batteries? But I found, in my opinion, if you're flying around, most of my crashes are from when I've hit the ground, sort of moving forwards. I hit the ground, that stops, my battery smashes over like this into the dirt. So if my battery's on the bottom, it's very rare that I'm going to be coming in for a crash and landing it with underneath just like that. So quite often, I'll strap a battery on underneath, unless a frame's specifically made for it, like the Chameleon, where it fits very, very nice and snug and brings it in a little bit. But for most of the time, I will pretty much fly around with it underneath because I think it's just better. You're not going to actually damage your battery, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a little bit safer. And those times when you do come in for a landing, you're not going very fast anyway, and you might just be dropping from a small little height, so the battery's going to be fine. Man, I seem to be getting the drone wolf out quite a bit, actually. I don't know why I'm choosing that quad so many times, actually. Oh, that was actually the last question that I had chosen. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Definitely subscribe for more FPV related content. If you guys have some questions that you want answered, definitely stick them in the comments below because I go through, I read every single one, and then that's where I can pick them out, talk about them, and not only might it help you, it might also help some other people out there as well. And the same thing goes, if you see a question like, man, I would really love to know the answer to that, definitely give that a thumbs up because that's going to push that to the top and that'll let me know that, look, a lot of people want to know the answer to that question. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying. What do you got on your goggles? What can you see? Trevor's lost his quad in this long grass near the river, so he might not come back, so he might be dead in 10 minutes time. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAVfutures family, there's things like bonus velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.